Service console and service console commands. Well, throughout all of this series, we've gone and done a lot of stuff inside of the GUI. We've logged into the VIC, we've logged into the web console, we've done all kinds of stuff where we've been inside of the graphical user interface. But sometimes, it's just plumb easier to do things from the command line. Now, ESX is built off of Linux infrastructure, and so building it off of Linux infrastructure means that any conversation about service console commands is really going to be kind of a Linux 101. And so if you don't have any Linux experience at this point, or any Unix experience at all at this point, this is going to be kind of helpful to you because we're going to go through some real basic Linux. And then the plus part of Linux 101 Plus is the additional commands that ESX provides that you can use to manipulate network and storage. You can use it to manipulate your virtual machines, and pretty much anything having to do that you can do inside of your virtual infrastructure client, you can do it inside of the service console as well. We're going to talk about those commands here in our SC command review. We're going to do some commands on navigation, files and file movement, and then also from the ESX side, network storage and virtual machine manipulation. All of this, we're going to use two tools. One is a tool called PuTTY, which is a very small tool. It's a freeware tool you can download off the internet, and it's a nice tool because it costs you nothing, and it allows you to SSH into your virtual server, your ESX server. Now, if you're familiar with the old concept of Telnet, SSH is really a secure shell. It's a secure form of Telnet that allows you to get a command prompt so that you can get a remote console from your ESX server, and then you can do whatever manipulation you need to. It's a nice tool. The other tool that you can use is WinSCP, and this is a tool for moving files back and forth between your Windows server, your Windows machine, and also your ESX servers. And what it does is it kind of takes all the complexities out of SCP, which is the secure copy protocol. It takes all the complexities out of SCP and puts it into a nice GUI interface. So really, even though we're going to talk about non-GUI interfaces, at the very end, we're going to show you one GUI interface that makes the non-GUI interfaces just a little bit easier. So let's go ahead and minimize this, and you'll see here I've got this PuTTY tool that I've downloaded here. This PuTTY tool I've actually downloaded from the internet, and when I double click it, the first thing it does is it brings me up a configuration screen. And what I've saved in here are a couple of settings here for 101 and 102. These are our two ESX servers in our environment. You'll notice here that we are using SSH to connect into those systems, and we're using port 22 to do that. If I click the open button, it will open up an SSH session to that ESX server. You'll see here I get the login as button. Now, if you remember when we talked about users and groups and a little bit earlier in another nugget as well, we talked about how in order to successfully log into the server, you actually have to have two logins because SSH doesn't allow you to log on as it's configured in ESX, doesn't allow you to log on as root. So what I've done is created a login for myself, GShields, and a password. I cannot log in directly as root because it's not going to allow me to. It's just going to say invalid password, invalid password. Once I've logged in, and you'll want to do this by creating a user in the ESX server itself that has console access. Once I've done that, then in order for me to be able to have root access to the server, I have to use the command su-. By doing su-, that says go ahead and elevate my current session to the root session. So I'm going to hit that, and then I need to type in the password for root. Now you'll notice here that a little bit changes. Our prompt changes from GShields to root, and our $ changes from $ to the £. This lets us know that we're actually running in a root session so that we know that we have a full ability to fix things and full ability to tear things up as well. So we're now logging in as root, and we want to do that because we're going to do some things that require root access in order for us to be able to do things. Now, the first thing you may want to do whenever you create your ESX server is probably somewhere inside of the home folder. You may want to create yourself a little location there inside of home. You'll see that bnugget, the user that we created back in that previous nugget, already has a home location created here. If I go to his home folder, well, there's really not that much in it. So, excuse me, if I go to home bnugget, there's not going to be that much in it. There's not much there at all. In the GShields folder, let's see. There's a little file there that I put there. That's just a test file I put there that has to do with one of the Ethernet interfaces. Now you'll see here that I'm using the ls command to view the contents of the folder, and the cd command, just like I would in Windows, to change directory to a new location. The one thing that's very similar about these commands is that the way it works in Unix and the way it works in Windows is pretty similar. You just go up the directories and you traverse down and you traverse back up with the ... to move back a directory, and you can do cd / to get to the root. root, which will show you all the directories in the root. There's ls there. One command that you may be of interest to you so you can find out more information about what each file or folder is extending the ls command and adding a -al capital F. Now, there are lots and lots of different ways that you can extend ls. There are all kinds of switches for ls, but the al capital F, or ALF, is the one that I tend to like the most because it provides not only which of the files in here are actually folders, but it also gives me information about their last modified time, who their user is, what group they're in, and also who has permissions in order to use this file as well. Now, you'll see in here, in terms of permissions, we have a whole lot of series of letters here and dashes that indicate what the permissions are. The very first item in here indicates that it's a directory. You'll see here that this D corresponds to the backslash here, showing that this is indeed a directory. And then after the D, I have RWX, RWX, and RWX. And essentially, this means user, group, and all. So the user for this particular file is root, and the group for this particular file is root as well. So the user has read, write, and execute permissions. The group has read and execute permissions, and everybody has read and execute permissions. The tool in which that we would change that, let's say this .auto.fsck file here that we want to change. You'll see it has read and write and read and then read for the world. If I wanted to change the permissions on a particular file or folder, I can do that with the chmod command. Now, if you talk to the Unix guys out there, the Unix guys will give you this crazy series of numbers that you've got to memorize in order to figure out how to change different commands. But I found that actually using the letters to associate what we're looking to do is a little bit easier. Let's say I want to add the execute permission, or maybe the write permission for everyone to this auto.fsck folder. I can do chmod A for all plus W for write. Oops, so I got to give it the .auto.fsck. So I do chmod A plus W and the name of the file. If I go back now, you'll see that the write permission has been given to everyone for this particular file. That allows us now to write to the file. It means that the file is no longer protected, etc., etc. So the chmod command gives you the ability to make some manipulations for it. Instead of A plus write, you can make it all plus read or all plus execute. You could do group plus write or read or execute, or you could do a user plus write or read or execute. So if you know that it's the user, if you know it's the group, if you know it's the all, if you want everyone to have access to it, you can do that with the chmod command. Let's say you want to change the group or the user that's associated with this file. I can change the group by typing chgrp and then giving it to the group. Maybe I want to give it to the wheel group, for example, .auto.fsck. If I do that, you'll see now that the group is associated with wheel instead of root. Maybe I want to change the user so that the user is no longer root, but the user is actually my name, G Shields. So I can go CHOWN for change owner. So CHOWN G Shields.auto.fsck. And if I go back, now you'll see that G Shields and wheel actually own this file. So these are some ways of actually changing information about the file that we're looking for. If you want to copy or move files, you can copy or move files with either the cp command or the mv command for copy or move. Let's say I want to copy this file into my home folder, so I can do cp.auto.fsck to home G Shields. I've just copied that file now from its current location inside of root, to my new location inside of home G Shields. So let's go there now. cd home G Shields ls. And we'll see here, there's, there it is, .auto.fsck. So this allows us to copy files around. What if I want to change the name of a file? I change the name of a file by actually using, strangely enough, the move command. So I can say .move.auto.fsck to .auto.fsck.back, for example. That allows me to go ahead and rename that file because I'm essentially moving it to its same location. So this is how we can move files and copy files around inside of our location. Now, one thing that you'll find, if I go back to root here, you'll see a location that is not in normal Linux distributions, and that's the VMFS folder. The VMFS folder is the location where our volumes, our data stores are stored for all of our items that make up our virtual machines. You'll see here, if I go into VMFS, volumes, and then I have a list of the different volumes that I've created. We've already shown this before in a previous Nugget. This nugget underscore data store is the location, the iSCSI data store where all of my virtual machines are currently being stored. If I do cd nugget underscore data store, I can look in there and see a list of all the virtual machines that I've created. Let's look at Nugget 1, for example. There's the VMDK file associated with Nugget 1. There's also a Nugget 1_1 that we've created. There's a few more files in there associated with Nugget 1_1. You'll see here that there's the VMX file. There's also some log files in here. There's the VMDK file. This is the real big file. This is the VMDK file that contains all the information about my virtual machine. Here's the swap file, etc., etc., etc. Now, the next tool that you're going to need to know is a tool that allows you to manipulate an existing file. In other words, read and write to the file. Let's say this VMX file, I want to go ahead and change in here. You can use the vi command, vi nugget1.vmx, to open that file up inside of a reader. There you can see you can go down and read and move around and make some changes. Maybe you want to change SCSI0 present from true to false. The way that we changed so we could actually add information in here is we hit the I command. You'll see here this changes us to an insert prompt that allows us to replace true with false. And once we're done, we hit the escape command to leave insert mode. So that's the most important part about VI is you hit the I command to start entering in data, and then the escape command to allow you to start moving around again inside of your file. I don't want to really change this, so I'm going to change this back to true. Hit the escape command again when I'm done. The way that I close the file and save it is I hit the colon command, and then if I want to close the file without actually saving it, I type Q or Q bang to say yes, for sure I want to do that. If I want to write to the file, in other words, save the file, I do WQ bang. So what this says is, I want to go ahead now, write the file, the changes that I've made, and go ahead and quit and don't ask me about it. So that's essentially the VI command. Now, VI has got all kinds of features and functionality that you can use in order to be able to manipulate files and search for text strings and do regular expressions inside of VI. But all you need to know is the I command to insert and the escape command to escape out, and then that colon WQ bang to save the file. And that's most of what you need to know in order to get the navigation pieces of VI around. Another command that comes in handy when you're looking at these logs, you'll see how big these logs can get, and sometimes actually using VI to push up and down the logs is a little bit painful. Well, a couple of commands that you can use in order to take a look at log files is, one of which is the tail command. If I type in tail vmware.log, it will give me the last couple of lines of the vmware.log file, because usually log files are being written to from the top down. And so what I'm really interested in are the last few entries in the log so I can see what's going on. Maybe I'm not interested in seeing the last 10 lines here. Maybe I'm interested in seeing the last 30 lines. I can say tail-30 vmware.log, and then I get the last 30 lines of that log to be able to take a look at and see what's going on my server. I can also, if I want to just see the log, just all I want to do is just print out the whole log to the screen, I can type cat vmware.log. Doing that actually sends the entire log to the screen. Now what you'll notice is we're seeing the entire log, but it goes by too fast. We can't actually see enough of the log because we get to the top of our buffer here, and we still have parts of our log that we want to see. So a tool that allows us to be able to move up and down in the file while we're viewing a particular file is the word less, L-E-S-S. So if we type less vmware.log, instead of actually seeing it, the entire thing shoot by so fast that we can't use it, now we have the ability of paging through page by page. If I hit the space bar, I'll go one page through my particular file, one page by one page, to be able to see information a page by a page and really parse the log and see what's going on inside of that log. If I hit the Q command, I'll actually quit, and I'm no longer paging through that file anymore. So we've talked about kind of log files and how you can look at them and how you can manipulate them. One of the most important things that you need to know in order to be able to get data in and off of your VMware server is how to transfer that data back and forth. Now you may be interested in transferring files, but you may be not necessarily from Windows to Unix. You may be wanting to transfer from Unix to Unix, and you don't want to use the interface. So, like for example, in here we have this VMX file, nugget1.vmx, that we've created here. And what I really want to do is I want to keep a copy of that Nugget1 VMX, and maybe I want to keep a copy in my local folder here on Nugget1, and maybe I want to send a copy over to ESX Nugget 2 so I can store a copy over there as well. I need to do that. I need to use a copy tool that will allow me to copy it to a different system. That tool is SCP. What I can do in order to do an SCP is if I have a username that I've created, a non-root username that I've created on the remote system, I can copy a particular file from this system to the remote system using the SCP command. So what I want to do is type SCP, then I want to type the name of the local file that I want to copy, nugget1.vmx, and then what I want to do is tell the system where I want it to go and who I want it to go as. So in my case, my username is gshields at 192.168.0.102. What this says is that the username gshields at the system 192.168.0.102 wants to actually copy the file nugget1.vmx. Then I can type a semicolon and then home gshields. This says, okay, once you get over there, put it in the home gshields folder whenever you're ready to go. If I hit the OK button here, it says, okay, we're using authentication here, and there's a certificate, an RSA key fingerprint that we need to store into our local connection here in order to be able to make that connection. This is done to encrypt the file as it moves from one site to the other. Do you want to continue connecting? I type yes. And it says, okay, we permanently added this to the list of known hosts. So now we're not going to get that error message anymore. Once we're done, we have to type in the password, and it copies our file. The one unique thing and very kind of cool thing actually about SCP is that as the file is copying, this file is really small, so it was difficult for us to see it occur. But as the file is copying, it will give us an ETA on how many minutes and how many seconds it's going to take to complete the transfer. So now if I go back over to ESX Nugget 2, what I'm going to see is this nugget1.vmx file in my /home/gshields folder that I've created over there. So this is the way that you can move files back and forth from Unix box to Unix box. Let's say though if you want to copy from Windows box to Unix box. Let's look at actually a non-GUI command called WinSCP. The WinSCP tool is actually a really handy tool for doing this movement of files back and forth between Windows and Unix because it takes some of the difficulty of all this craziness between source location and destination location and commas and @ signs and puts it into a nice GUI interface. So let me go ahead and bring up the WinSCP command here. It's our familiar GUI that we're used to seeing. There's WinSCP logon. I already have a connection here to 0.60, but what I want to create is a connection to 192.168.0.101. Again, using port 22 because SCP uses the SSH protocol to do the transfer. My username in this case is going to be gshields, and there's my password. Here's my private key file. I want to use SCP because that's the mechanism by which ESX recognizes as a way to transfer files. If I click the login button, what it's going to do is log into the ESX server and begin a session so that we can see what's on the remote location and what's on the local location. Let me go ahead and drag this over here so we can take a look at it. You'll see here this is my local machine and this is my remote machine. There's that folder in home gshields right there. There's that ifconfig.eth0 folder that we created. There's that autofsck.back folder that we created. Maybe I want to transfer over this desktop.ini file from my documents location on my local machine. If I take that and drag it over from one place to the other, it says, do you want to copy it? Yes, I want to copy it. And the copying is complete. Oh, looks like permission is denied actually in the remote location because of that username. We actually have to make sure that permissions are okay for us to be able to make the transfer. And you'll use the chmod command to open up permissions so that we can do that. So WinSCP is a nice tool for us to be able to move files back and forth if we need to move them back and forth from Unix to Windows. Maybe I want to drag this eth0 file from that location back into my Windows box. I can hit the copy command, and there it is. Now it appears inside of my Windows box. So WinSCP is also a free tool that you can download. It's download it off the internet, put it on your machine, and make it available for yourself so that you can transfer your files back and forth. Now let's move away actually from the concept of dealing with file transfers, and we want to deal with a little bit with performance. Now we talked about this when we talked about performance, but I think it's worth actually bringing it up again just so that we have a complete understanding of what's going on with these service console commands. That's really the top and the ESX top command. Now I want to spend not a lot of time on this because we already have talked a bit about it, but if I type in the top command, it will give me, based on the ESX server itself, all of the processes on the ESX server, what processes are consuming CPU, what processes are consuming memory, what their status is, what their size is, what their user is, what their PID is, what their priority is. All of these are updated, and it's a dynamically updated understanding of what's going on in my system. I can see what the memory memory use is, how much a swap file is used, what total CPU use is, etc. Now, the one thing that top doesn't do is it doesn't give us a good understanding of what's going on inside the virtual environment. Because top only looks at what's going on inside of Linux, it can't see into the VM kernel to get an understanding of what the virtual machines are doing inside of that VM kernel. So what VMware did is they wrote another tool called ESXtop. And what the ESXtop does is it sort of filters out all of the stuff that we don't care about associated with the Linux, but gives us an understanding of what's going on inside of the virtual environment. Now you'll see here's some generic stuff associated with VMware itself and vMotion and the VMK authorization, but here is our server Nugget 1. And you'll see its percent used and percent system and overlap and run, and it tells us how much of our resources are currently being used by Nugget 1. Again, it's also a dynamic tool. It updates every so often, so we can see from a command line sense what's going on our system. There are a number of additional other tools that are available to us as well that specifically help us out with managing our ESX environment. Now, if you think about it, when we have the ability, and Linux has the ability to change around what's going on inside of the Linux, we can change the networking abilities, we can change our storage abilities, but that doesn't really mate its way into the virtualization environment. It doesn't have anything to do with the VM kernel. So VMware had to create their own set of commands, and these commands will be used to manipulate virtual switches, manipulate virtual networks and the firewall, and also your storage connections to the data store. What I'm going to show you here is I'm going to show you how you can use these commands to list information. What I'm not, however, going to show you is how to use these commands to manipulate information, because a lot of these commands may or may not be completely appropriate to be used. I want to show anything that you may accidentally delete something in your environment. But what you can do is, if you understand what the commands are, then you can expand your knowledge later on by using the -- help command. So let's talk about the first one here. All of these commands start off with ESXCFG-. And this essentially says, ESX, go ahead, let's configure my ESX server. The first one we want to talk about is virtual switch information. So let's say vSwitch, and then I can do -L. This will show me all the information about the existing virtual switches and the port groups and all the network cards that are connected into those virtual switches. You'll see here that vSwitch 0 has 32 ports, 3 of which are used, 32 are configured, and the uplink port is a physical card called VMNIC2. It is connected into the service console on port group 0. It has its VLAN ID of 1, and it's currently 1 used ports of VMNIC2. Same thing happens in virtual switch 1 and virtual switch 2. If I wanted to change, for example, what I wanted to look at, I could do -- help to get a listing of the commands with vSwitch of what I could do to add, remove, or update my existing virtual switches. You'll see here I can do -A to add, -D to delete. I can do -U to unlink or change to port groups with -P. All of these are available for ESXconfig -vSwitch. But what if I'm more interested in my network information? If I want to check out networking information, I can do ESXCFG-VSWIF-L. And what this shows me is for the physical cards. Now, before we talked about some of the logical cards, but for the physical cards, specifically the one that has to do with the service console, what's going on with those cards? You'll see here that we have enabled DHCP vSwitch 0. Here's the service console. Here's the IP address, the netmask, and the broadcast address for that card. And we'll see it's not DHCP enabled, but it's not DHCP'd, but it is enabled at this point. Same thing as before. If we type the -- help command, we can see more information about how we would change that connection into our service console. Now remember, if you go and you change an IP address on your service console and you're doing it from a remote console, doing that may involve some loss of network connectivity. So there's never any, you can always create multiple connections into the service console. There's nothing wrong with doing that or having multiple NICs that have service console activity. And you really should do this if you make any changes to the service console NIC. So be aware, if you're using this command to change any information about your service console NIC, you will lose network connectivity whenever you make the change. Let's take a look at the other NICs as well. ESXCFG-NICs-L. This gives some information about all the other network cards that are connected into our system. Here's VMNIC 0. It's a PCI card. There's the driver for it. It's up, it's speed, it's duplex, and its description. Same thing for VMNIC 1 and VMNIC 2. This gives us information about how to handle the NICs on our machines. If we move to the -help command, we can see, okay, we can change the speed and change the duplex and restore the NICs configured speed and duplex settings for those NICs on our system. So this is a way that we can manipulate the network on our system, not only from the physical layer, but also from the virtual layer as well. Now, one of the things that a lot of people have problems with is that when you put the CD in the drive and you build up your initial your initial ESX server, when you do that, you get the option of entering in information about your IP address and your subnet mask and all those sorts of things. But once you get it done, the only way to change that is really to dig deep into the Linux. One of the things that you can do to change, for example, the service console is using ESX CFG-V SWIF and use the -I command. Let's say I wanted to change that service console NIC from 1.0.101 to 0.120. I could do 192.168, 0.120, and then I change the network mask to 255.255.255.0. And then I have to identify the network card that I want to choose, VSWF0, maybe this network card. And that would actually change my information about that network card and update the IP address from 101 to 120. Now, I just said that we probably don't want to do that, so we're not actually going to do this. But if you needed to change information about that card, you can do that with this ESX CFG-vSWIF command. Now, interesting enough, earlier we talked about firewall and how the ESX server has a nice firewall in it, and we can use that firewall to block ports. But the problem with the ESX firewall, at least in the GUI, is that there are only certain elements that are available inside of the GUI. There may be some non-standard ports that you need to create so that you can enable some sort of agent, maybe a backup agent or a monitoring agent on your system. In order to do that, we can do that from the command line here, ESX CFG-firewall. Now I'm going to use the -Q command here because the -Q command is going to bring up all the parameters associated with that firewall. And the first thing I'm going to tell you is there's quite a bit of parameters. You can see here, I don't know, we've got status, related, established, state new. These are the addresses and the subnet mask associated with it we've created at this point. If we scroll up here, let's see if we can find a little bit more information about it. The target information, here's the packets, here's the bytes, here's the in, the out information, source and destination information here that we've created for our firewall, etc. This is the DBT 2049, 11, 111, 67, 68, 902. These are all the ports that we've created that are ports that are allowed or disallowed from moving in and out of our firewall. So this gives us a view of what's allowed in our firewall and what's allowed out of our firewall. Again, it's pretty complicated to view here, but we're dealing with the Linux firewall, and the Linux firewall is very, very robust in what it can allow and what it cannot allow. If I want to add another exclusion for my firewall, if I want to say I want to add in an outbound port so that that's not in the GUI, I can do that with the ESX CFG-firewall command. What I want to do is say, okay, I want to create another port. Let's say I want to, I don't know, let's say I want to create an RDP port so I can RDP into my server. Not that I'd ever need to use Windows RDP to move into my Unix server, but this is just an option for me. I can create this by doing ESX CFG-firewall, and then I need to type in the port number, 3389, which is the port number for RDP. It's a TCP port. It's outbound, and then the friendly name that I want to create for this is RDP. By doing that now, I'm opening up a hole in my firewall to actually allow port 3389 connection into my ESX server. The firewall will no longer prevent that from occurring. So you can add these non-specific ports using ESX CFG-firewall to create non-standard port exclusions in that firewall for you as well. Let's change gears a little bit and move away from the networking topics that we want to talk about and talk a little bit more about maybe the storage topics of what command lines we'd want to be interested in to take a look at storage too. I'm going to type the clear command in here to clear my screen. And let's say I have a NAS connection in here that I want to take a look at. If I do ESX CFG-NAS-L, I can get information about what NFS connections are currently connected into. You'll see here that I have a mount created for NuggetLab_NFS. It's currently connected to home/NuggetLab from the server 192.168.0.105. But what if I have, I don't know, what if I have iSCSI information? I can do that with ESX CFG-SWI SCSI -help. Now, you can't really use this command, the software iSCSI command, to enumerate information, but you can use it to enable and disable software iSCSI. Also to query to see if it's on or off, or even force a rescan. You remember how we had to configure the iSCSI connection on the iSCSI target and then rescan to get the server to recognize that there was a new iSCSI target available for us? You can do that here by typing dash scan. And that will rescan the iSCSI targets to see if there are any more targets available for us. Now, if we're talking about any conversation that talks about disk space is going to have, or storage is going to have to talk about disk space. And there are two commands that you'll want to know and keep in the back of your mind associated with disk space. Those are the df and the vdf command. Now, the df command is a Unix command that says, okay, tell me what's going on the disk, what the disk usage is. And I want to use the dash h command because the dash h command actually recompiles the information to make it human readable. You'll see here that of our various file systems, of which there are 4 of them here, of the various file systems, we can see what the size is, and we can see how much of that file system is used, how much is available, and what percentage of that file system is used as well. You'll see here also what the mount point is for that file system. Our root file system here currently has 1.4 gigabytes of used space out of the total 4.9 gigabytes of space available, so that gives us about 31% used. We also have a mount point on boot, on dev/shm and /var/log as well. These are the mount points that we created when we built our system. Now, if we want to know more information about the virtual side of what's going on, we can use VDF to get information about the virtual components of our server as well. Now, DF is a Linux command, whereas VDF is more of a VMware command. What it adds to our list is also in that devices location, in the VMFS folder, we can see of that location what's available to us. Here's that 52 gig partition and a 12 gig and a 19 gig and a 17 gig partition and how much of those is being used. Looks here like our Nugget data store is about 63% used now. It's getting a little full up right there. We can see that with this VDF command, and we want to use that -h command to help us understand and put it into more human readable format. Now, understanding all of this is really helpful, but one of the things that I think a lot of us would really like to know is how we can manipulate our virtual machines inside of the command prompt as well. And there are 2 commands that we want to know and really know pretty well, actually, in order to manipulate our virtual machines. The first is vmkfs tools. And if we take a look at dash help here, we'll see that the vmkfs tools command has quite a bit of information about what we can do with the virtual machines on our system. You'll see here that options for file system. This tool allows us to create a file system. Let's say that we want to create another data store. We can do that here with vmkfs tools. We can query that file system. We can create virtual disks. We can create VMDK files in that file system. We can change the format for those files. We can write zeros or inflate or delete virtual disks or rename virtual disks or even clone them. So this allows us with vmkfs tools to do some file system manipulation of the VMFS partitions for all of the virtual machines in our environment. We have the option for devices here. We can scan the adapter. We can do some locking information here with vmkfs tools as well. So you can use this to help you create file systems. You can use this to help you create data stores and then populate those stores with essentially empty VMDK files as well. The other command that we want to talk about here is VMware-CMD. The VMware-CMD command gives us a lot of manipulation power over all of the systems that are currently in our environment. Right now, hosted on ESX Nugget 1, we have one VMX file. We have one virtual machine that's currently running. And so when we type VMware-CMD-L, we can actually see that where that VMX file is being hosted from. But if I type VMware-CMD-help, you can see that the amount of functionality that's brought out by doing this is pretty cool, actually. Let me go ahead and take a look at this. So we can say connect to a remote host, for example, using an alternate port or username or password. And once we've done that, we can register or unregister a server, or for VMs, we can start a VM, we can stop the VM, or reset or suspend, or get the configuration for it, or connect a device. So if we wanted to connect, for example, another SCSI device or another parallel to port device, we could do that here. We could get the heartbeat, we can get its uptime, we can get whatever resources, we can see if it has a snapshot. All of this information is available for us within VMware-CMD. And so as you're creating your scripts or you're wanting to do some command line manipulation, you can use VMware-CMD to script the starting and the stopping of those virtual machines, or the creating of a snapshot of those virtual machines, or anything that you really need to do with those virtual machines to power them on, power them off, or essentially manipulate them. So one last command that we want to show you, anytime you make any changes into whether it's the networking or whether it's the storage or anything like that, the one thing that you will want to do in order to update those changes into the VIC is type service mgmt-vmware restart. And this is a command and similar to Windows, where you're restarting the service. This actually restarts the VMware management daemon. And what it's going to do is say, okay, VMware Server Host Agent Services, go ahead and start. We're going to do all of the server management services here. And once we've done that, all of the changes that we make here inside of this location will get updated into the VIC, so that our VIC will understand and see what's going on and understand what we've done. So what have we talked about today? We've talked about really the Service Console. We talked about how you can log into the Service Console, how you can use the tools PuTTY and WinSCP to help you manipulate your VMware infrastructure without using the virtual infrastructure client. You know, if you've got a problem where the Virtual Center server isn't working and your virtual infrastructure client isn't working, having a knowledge of what these command line tools are, even if you don't use them every day, will come in handy for helping you get your environment brought back up to health when it's not working all that well. We talked about how to use navigation commands and also how to do files and file movement commands, and also the specific ESX commands involved with network and storage and VM manipulation. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.